Now let's start with something simple. Imagine you're responsible for a credit card transaction dataset. This dataset has millions of rows, obviously changing all the time, but also has a ton of opportunity hidden in it. You have information about how people spend their money. You have behavioral shifts that are hidden in the latest trends. Really, information that if as a company we're able to leverage and act on proactively, we'd probably be doing pretty good for ourselves. The problem is that leveraging that type of information, finding those hidden behavior shifts in those latest trends, is typically very manual today. Now, in order to find them, someone needs to notice that there was a trend change, needs to investigate it to see if it's meaningful, needs to then find out if it's meaningful to us as a business, and then finally decide what we should do with it. Now, even for a strong analyst, that process could take hours. And I guess if we're being honest, probably even days. And because your strongest analysts, even your strongest analysts, aren't working 24/7, a lot of times this manual process happens in a very reactive manner, right? It happens when someone down the line notices something, notices that maybe something changed a week ago and asks, why did it change? And of course, that's a very high priority question that must be answered right away. Now, what I want to show you and what you're looking at here is what happens if we take this manual loop and completely automate it. Now, what you see here is your insights feed. This is a news feed of sorts that brings in everything that's noteworthy of your data and surfaces it automatically. It looks at your data 24/7, investigates changes in it, and creates this news feed and categorizes things like business insights, data quality issues, changes in the source data, and things like that. Now, like every news feed, you can decide who to follow, what is interesting to you. Maybe that's business insights, maybe that's data quality issues. You can decide to follow specific data domains. But in this case, we're just going to click on this one for a fact transactions table, this online retail volume spikes on March 31st. Now, if I were to see this, if I was looking at a dashboard, depending on, and let me show you the visualization down here, depending on what percentage of those records the online retail category made up, I might have noticed on the dashboard that it went, maybe a slight dip or a slight increase to the right. But really what's happening here in this insight is much more interesting. So powered by our AI algorithms, those same algorithms that profile your data constantly, look for changes, our system detected a change in that data, that change in transaction volume. From there, it sent it to an agent to then go and investigate it. That agent broke down transaction volume by segments and found that specifically online retail segment increased. And then here at the top, it created this whole thing, it created a report for us to look at. Now, obviously it described a pattern, but it also noted that this pattern has not been observed at prior month's ends. And that also marketing and growth teams may want to respond quickly and capture this if this is an opportunity. Now you can see this business summary, the technical summary, the report visualizations, all the evidence that the agent found behind this. And then down here, the business impact and some recommendations for the next steps. And what's cool about this is absolutely none of this was written by a human. All of this is automatically generated, investigated, and surfaced here. But I should note that just because it wasn't written by a human doesn't mean that this is all happening in isolation. Now, this agent already knows everything that my team knows about that table as well. If we click into the table here, we can go into the documentation tab and see a little bit of our data documentation agent in action. Now, Elliot talked about this briefly already, but just to give you an idea, this data documentation also knows everything Anomalo knows, right? It knows about the metadata, it knows about the values, it knows about the profiles, the data that keep changing and how that data changes, the key metrics you care about. But the cool thing about it is that we also go where data documentation actually lives. Now, I would say if you've ever, and I've had to do that before, if you've ever had to lead a data documentation effort or had to be a part of it, you know that no matter how detail-oriented you are and how type A and diligent you are, that data documentation almost always goes stale, pretty much as soon as you put it down on paper or in a YAML file, actually, in most cases. So we decided we're not going to make you do that, and we're not going to rely on you doing that. Instead, we're going to go straight to the source. Really, data documentation lives in the subject matter expert's head most of the time. And in the interactions they have with other team members when they ask questions and when they ask them to explain certain quirks about the table itself. Now, what we do is we take those interactions, we connect to your internal messages. Of course, you allow that. We connect to your internal messages, pull those interactions out. We also connect to your internal documents and internal wikis that maybe those subject matter experts created to document some weird things that might have happened in the data in the past and how to use it. Now, this agent connects to everything Anomalo and your internal knowledge base, synthesizes all of that information, and creates a document just like the one here that looks at things like what a row really means in this table, things like lineage, update cadence, how you should interact with this table. Of course, any quirks for particular columns, who the in-house expert is, and even things down here like usage patterns and business terms. In this case, business terms, it tells us how we can categorize customer type from entry level to premium based on their credit card tier, credit card limit tier. And then things like, well, actually, this table is very often used by our marketing team to proactively target segments that seem to be spiking. Because of this exact thing is actually why we surface this as a business insight to begin with. Now, this may seem simple, and even leaving alone, I would say, the data documentation agent, which is a whole beast in its own right, just looking at this insight, doing this manually would have been a very huge effort, right? For an analyst, they would have had to notice the uptick in transaction volume. They would have had to break down by merchant category to find the driver of this uptick, find that it's online retail. Then from there, they would have had to investigate within that, well, why is that the driver? And then only then decide what to do next. Now, that's not one query. It's also not just a series of queries. It's a query and a decision that needs to be made after every single time. And by the way, this is probably not the only question I'm answering for that day. I probably have hundreds of these. And the hardest part is just knowing where to start. Now, instead of wondering where I should start, I have this report. With this report, with its recommendations, I can actually dive in and decide what to do exactly next. So here, I'll click Dive In with Ada. And this is where our conversational analytics agent comes in. So powered by that insight, the visualization and the report that was generated by our insights agent, I can come in here and dig in deeper and ask questions. So I can come in and ask, is this increase driven by specific customer segments? So I will send that. The agent will start thinking. Let's give it a second. If not, I can show you. So it starts thinking, it starts deciding, well, we need to break this down by customer segments, comes up with the query. And what's cool about this query is that it pulls up that it should segment the user based on our semantic meaning of what a low, entry, low, mid, high, and premium user is. And then it asks me to confirm if I want to run this query. So I'm going to say yes, and don't ask me again. But because this might take time, I'm going to switch over to a previous conversation to show you the outcome. So after the agent ran all the queries down here, it summarized its findings. So it says that the spike was broad, but uneven across customer tiers. The premium tier drove the spike had the highest surge in the spike, whereas the entry tier was relatively flat or was not affected by it. So if I was sitting on the marketing team, a lot of bells will go off. I need to target that premium customer, right? But imagine I wasn't sitting on the marketing team, and imagine I didn't know the documentation that this is what the marketing team or the growth team uses. I can come in here and ask, what should we do about this? Again, the agent takes in everything it has in context, all your business context and all it knows about this particular change, and suggests some steps. Let me make this full screen so you can see this better. So suggest some steps. So here, you should investigate the root cause. Again, we know there's an uptick, but why? Was there a promotional event? Was there something at the center of it that we can replicate as well? It also suggests you should take advantage of the demand shift. That's coming from our data documentation agent that said, well, the marketing and the growth team really use this. So it says, go ahead and notify them, see if they should do something about it. And the last thing it suggests here is that you should set up a data quality check so you don't have to go through this again next time. But I would say before we take any action on this, I want to show you something else cool that's happening. The system is learning from every interaction I have with it. So if I reinforce and say something like, one note for the future, whenever you see spikes in certain merchants or categories, make sure to always investigate if specific customer segments are impacted so that we don't need to do further investigation after. The system will remember that. If we go into this memory tab, what you see up across the top is automated learnings. These are learnings that we're always scanning for and scanning the conversations to decide what is pertinent and what we should save and share. In this case, it created a business rule, and it said the learning is that when investigating spikes, we should always break down by customer segment, and this should ensure that downstream consumers get the full picture in one analysis rather than requiring additional follow-up queries. And that's exactly the beauty of it, right? It doesn't have to start from zero next time. I don't have to ask it the follow-up question. It will do this all automatically. I would say another cool thing about this particular feature is that this is not limited to just my interactions with this table or just my interactions with this particular agent. Because we're a platform, all of these learnings are shared across all of our agents that we've shipped. So if another agent ever comes across a similar situation where this context could be useful, it's going to pull it in and know exactly what to do. So again, you're not just doing one-off investigations. You're not just asking questions. You're making the system smarter over time. So before we finish, we're going to go back here and let's set up that data quality check. So it asked me, and I told it right here, let's set up, oops. Let's give it a good response. Yeah, so you can see the one below. Let's set up a data quality check to look for any changes in the categories like you suggested. So this time, our conversational analytics agent goes through all the checks that are available, selects the segment check, and then creates all the parameters that we should use. It asks me to review them. I gave it a thumbs up, and then it went ahead and created the check. So you can click into here, and we can see the check itself. So we can make sure that it's set up correctly and that we can know where to follow it along in the future. And there it is. That way, again, in the future, instead of going through this investigation, this is now a known, not an unknown. So all the relevant people will be alerted right away. Now, this is really what we mean by self-driving data, a system that's constantly surfacing what matters, explaining why it thinks it matters, and helping you decide what to do next. So instead of having to figure out where you start, you always start with an answer or something that could potentially matter or that you should maybe act on right away. That way, you can spend most of your time making decisions. And I would say, I don't know about you, but that is definitely the high leverage work that I signed up for when signing up to be on the team.